Dave Carter. I'm engineering librarian and video game archivist at the University of Michigan Library.
So what's the extent of your collection here?
So we have over 3,000 different games for around 35 different systems. Everything reaching from the old school days of Atari 2600 and Intellivision and ColecoVision up through all your Nintendos and your Sega stuff to the newest things, your PlayStation 3, Xbox 360. We also have handhelds of a variety of different vintages. And we have some computer games stretching back to Commodore 64. We got an Amiga, that kind of stuff. Again, up to your latest Windows games, and we have a smattering of board games as well.
What's the goal for your collection?
Well, so the ultimate goal would be one of everything. That's obviously not a goal that we're going to reach anytime soon or at all, because they keep making new games. So our realistic goal is, to be sort of representative of the history of video games. What was important, what was interesting, and then not only to preserve the games, but also to preserve the game playing experience. So we like to have the old school monitors in order, TVs and stuff like that to hook up the original game systems to.
There are some other video game preservation projects, but not a lot of them actually let you play the games. Why did you choose to do that here?
So yeah, we have what I like to call a usable archive, which, yes, we allow people to come in and actually play the games that we have in our archive. Because, like I said, we're trying to preserve the experience as well. So I want people to be able to get their hands on stuff and play with stuff and interact with the archive and use it. I think that lets people engage with the archive more and know that we're here and look for ways to use the archive in their research projects or their school projects or things like that. So over here in the corner we have a Commodore 64. Next to that we have most of our stations have multiple systems on the monitor. This one has a Super Nintendo and a Sega Master System and an Odyssey 2 next to it. Next to that, we have what looks like an Atari 7800, an Atari 5200, and a Nintendo Entertainment System with the light gun, because people like to play Duck Hunt. Next to that, we have the Atari 2600 and the Intellivision and a ColecoVision.
Now, aside from playing, are there research projects that are done here?
Sure. So we have a variety of things. Couple ways that things are used. Sometimes students use them for individual or group projects in their classes. They may not necessarily be specifically tasked with using video games, but they find a way to make use of it. Other times we'll have classes that are studying video games in one way or another come into the archive to make use of the archive. For example, an English class that was looking at new media came in and explored different narrative ways that games are used for that. Or an individual project, I had a student looking at a specific video game composer for music for video games. I wanted to play the games and see how the music was being used in the games. Or another who was looking at the use of, or looking at games that had been censored in Germany and looking at what were the elements in those games which caused them to be censored. We have groups that come in every semester. They're from an industrial operations engineering class where they're studying the effects of texting while driving, which is obviously it's a experiment you don't want to actually carry out on the road, but they make use of our Xbox 360 and the driving wheel and some of the racing games, and then have their subjects learn how to drive using that, and then have them try to drive around while texting, and then they crash into walls and things like that. So there's an example of their actual assignment has nothing to do with video games at all, but they're able to make use of the games that we have here in the space. All right, so over at this station on the right-hand side, we have that's a 3DO system on the top, then a Sega Genesis and a PlayStation 1. And then over on the left-hand side, we have a TurboGrafx 16, a Sega Saturn, and a Philips CDI machine. All right, this station over on the right-hand side, we have a PS2 Slim on the top, and then an original Xbox on the bottom. And then over on the left, a stack of Nintendo stuff, a GameCube, and a Super Nintendo, and another Nintendo entertainment system. So here is some of our newer systems hooked up to flat panels, a couple of Xbox 360s, and a PlayStation 3. Then our other Xboxes and PlayStations, newest vintage, are hooked up to the large screen TVs in the back of the archive.
Do these get a lot of use?
Oh yes, yeah. For day-to-day use, these are probably the most popular. All right, so here, this station on the right is a Nintendo 64 in glorious Dayglow green, and on the left is a Nintendo Wii. And over here at this station, Nintendo 64, a Sega Dreamcast, a first round of PlayStation 2. And then another original Xbox.
Now, most of the book librarians I know are constantly lamenting a lack of funding to go out and get the items they want. Is that difficult here too?
Well, I mean, librarians are always going to complain that they don't have enough funding. Although I will say, the University of Michigan Library is fairly well funded. We're a Tier 1 research institution, so libraries are considered an important part of the institution. So we could always use more money. Like I said, I'd like one of everything, but who's got the money for that? So I do have to make this when I'm purchasing things. I do have to make decisions based on many of the things I said before. Historical significance and interest, and those kinds of things, and trying to have a wide variety of types of games available. For people, our regular clientele may not be interested in Strawberry Shortcake's music matchup, but it's important to have games from examples of different genres and things like that.
Now you have a lot of old hardware here too.
Yeah.
Is maintenance for that a difficult problem?
It's an interesting problem. I don't know how difficult it is. Our main way of dealing with that is just to replace things when they go bad. We have several extra NESs and Super Nintendos, Nintendo 64s, and PlayStations and all that in our back room, as it were. So when one stops working, we can halt the other one down, or sometimes we can cannibalize from parts from one that's not working to put in another that's not working and get a working machine out of it that way. We have a PC that we call our Franken PC that was just sort of assembled out of parts of like 3 different donated computers that we had to get one working. It's got a working 5¼ inch floppy and a 3½ inch floppy and an optical drive and everything in it, and it's got DOSBox running on it so that we can run old DOS-based games on it. So we do a fair amount of minor repairs for stuff, but you can pick up an NES for $50 or less on eBay, and it takes you more than $50 worth of labor to fix it. It's a fairly easy equation to make there. But we do try to keep the equipment in working order as much as possible and replace it when it stops working.
Now everybody knows the old trick where you blow in an NES cartridge to make it work.
Right.
Are there any other interesting quirks you have with the older stuff?
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of those old, especially the really old ones, remember that box that you used to have that you'd plug into and then attach the antenna leads to that? Most of our TVs, as old as they are, aren't that old. And you don't want to go through the box and then go to an adapter to step, because you're changing impedances twice and it messes things up. So we've got this little dongle that we got from Radio Shack. It's like $350 or something like that. That just keeps the impedance the same but changes the connection from a RF to a coax. But then like the Atari is like really iffy, and you have to like twist I like touch it 3 or 4 times and twist it just right, and then finally the picture comes in and works on it. So yeah, there's lots of little tricks for the old systems and figuring out how to attach things, but it's mostly, it's not rocket science, that kind of stuff.
All right, do you mind if we take a look around?
Oh yeah, please do.
All right.
A couple of older school PCs here. On the right is one that's just running Windows XP for playing games that are 4 or 5 years old or so, or don't require a lot of horsepower. And then on the left is the aforementioned Franken PC. that's got 5¼ 3.5" floppies and an optical drive. Has DOS box on it for running your older vintage of PC games. So here on the left we have a Macintosh LC3 for running your early 90s Macintosh games. A lot of the original CD-ROM titles like Myst and stuff like that would run on such a system. Then on the right is a Commodore Amiga 3000, well known and beloved by people who actually own one, and pretty much unknown by people who didn't.
Do you have a lot of games for these?
So for the Amiga, we've got, I don't know, about 40 games or so for it. The Mac, we don't have a lot of games installed on it, but we do have games that could be installed on it. Vintage Mac gaming is not necessarily our biggest call for stuff, but you know, it's another era of gaming that we want to have represented in the archive. So these two stations, over on the left, yet another Nintendo 64 and PS2 and a GameCube. In the middle, there's a Sega Genesis. Then on the left, we have on the top the Sega Genesis with the Sega CD and the 32X extension system and all the funky patch cords and stuff that are required to make that work. An Atari Jaguar there in the middle, and yet another Nintendo 64 on the bottom. So this is our motion gaming and music gaming room. So the chairs can push back, and there's a wide space out there. So if people want to use the Wii or the Kinect or the PlayStation Move thing, they can swing their hands around and dance or whatever, and be able to do that. Or put out the drum set and the guitars and whatever, and we can close the door so that they don't bother the other people as much when they're banging on the drums and stuff, playing Rock Band or Guitar Hero or something like that. Here's a shelf of controllers, most of which are Rock Band controllers, various guitars, the keytar. Then over on the left, the DJ Hero turntable, the what is that? The skateboard thing for the Tony Hawk game, some microphones and whatnot.
How much use does the DJ Hero thing get?
Not a lot of use. There are some people who like that game, come to play it. Weren't willing to spend the $150 whatever when it first came out, but we're more than willing to come by and play it here. So here's the controller for Steel Battalion, which is a mech simulator game for the original Xbox. The controller has like 30 or so different buttons and switches and 2 joysticks, and there's like a thumbstick on the left joystick. It's got 3 different pedals. Like I said, it's a mech simulator game where you're piloting a battle mech and trying to shoot other people in battle mechs, and it's, I guess, meant to simulate what the cockpit would be like. Although I think it's funny that the military is actually exploring using Xbox controllers for like their drones and things like that, because that's what the soldiers are used to using for those sorts of things, and they're not doing stuff like this for actual futuristic warfare. I think it'll be much more like video games than the cockpit of an airplane kind of thing. But yeah, this is the game that when people want to know what's the craziest controller we have, I'll show them that. And it's if you can just get out of the hangar on that game, it's a major accomplishment. So here's our second large screen gaming system. It's got a PS3 and an Xbox 360 hooked up to it. It's got wireless headphones so that people can listen to it and not bother the people around them. Yeah. So this then is, I guess, our back room of the archive. So on the shelf we have extra systems for many of the older systems there. Cleaning supplies, totes full of miscellaneous controllers and cords and whatnot. Some older vintage computers like a VIC-20 and an old Atari and things. So mostly what we keep back here are duplicates of things, or things that are too fragile just to have out for people to paw on their own, like the Vectrix or the Nintendo Virtual Boy or things like that. But if people want to use them, they just need to ask and we can get them set up.